Hi everyone, Caitlin Stansel here. You may have noticed I'm not at the WMBF news desk today, and that's because I'm in New York City. Tomorrow, I have the chance to sit down one-on-one with former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, who is now 1 year into her role as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. I've been working for almost a year to line this interview up for you guys. I want to ask her what it's been like transitioning from Chief Executive of South Carolina to the world's stage, working here at the United Nations. And I also want to ask her how her work here at the UN impacts us everyday Americans. But this morning, I had the chance to get an inside look at Ambassador Haley in action as she gave a speech during the Security Council meeting here at UN headquarters. Today, she focused on what it would take to bring peace to the Middle East.
Peace requires compromise. It requires solutions that take into account the core interests of all sides. And that is what the United States is focused on for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Hate-filled speeches and end runs around negotiations take us nowhere. Ultimately, peace will not be achieved without leaders with courage.
I sit down with Ambassador Haley tomorrow, one-on-one at noon, and we will have live reports starting at 4 on WMBF News. I'll ask her everything from what this past year has been like to what the future might hold for her and her career. From the UN headquarters in New York City, I'm Caitlin Stansel for WMBF News.
And it's a story that has taken us up to the Big Apple. We get a special preview of Caitlin's exclusive interview with United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley. You don't want to miss it.
Today marks 1 year since our former Governor Nikki Haley picked up her South Carolina roots and moved them here to New York City. Her office now sits in the U.S. mission to the United Nations right across the street from UN headquarters. And tomorrow, this is where I'll talk with Ambassador Haley in a one-on-one interview. I've got a list of questions a mile long, but I only get about 10 minutes or so to talk to her. So I'm trying to squeeze the most important ones in during that short time. And I think what many of you out there are wondering is how her work here at the UN impacts you, the everyday American. I'll ask her about that. Plus, I'm going to ask her how the Trump administration and the president's words and actions impact her work with other countries here at the UN. And of course, I want to know what she misses most about South Carolina. And if I had to guess, it's probably the weather. Catch my live reports tomorrow starting at 4 o'clock on WMBF News. In New York City, I'm Caitlin Stansel. Hello, Grand Strand and PD. I am far from home in New York City to talk to a very special South Carolinian, former South Carolina Governor and current U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. It's been a whirlwind trip so far, and we haven't even had our chance to talk to Haley just yet. But tomorrow I'm going to sit down with her one-on-one and ask her all about how this past year has been so far. This time last year, Ambassador Haley resigned as governor of South Carolina and was sworn in as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. Leading up to that interview with her tomorrow, we got to see her in action during today's Security Council meeting. The focus of today's meeting, the ongoing Israeli and Palestinian conflict. And this issue at the forefront of global concern right now, with several world leaders, humanitarian groups, and even some celebrities criticizing the Trump administration for cutting U.S. funding to the UN agency that helps Palestinian refugees. Here's a small bit of what Ambassador Haley said today.
The United States remains fully prepared and eager to pursue peace. We have done nothing to prejudge the final borders of Jerusalem. We have done nothing to alter the status of the holy sites. We remain committed to the possibility and potential of two states, if agreed to by the parties. Just as it did with Egypt, peace requires compromise.
The Palestinian representative called this the most volatile time right now, saying the very principles of the UN's existence are being trampled, and he questioned what kind of message is being sent with the reduction of humanitarian support. He even questioned if this money is being used as a political tool, and there may be something to that. In December, President Trump formally recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and that decision has been scrutinized by many, but also celebrated by many. Now, something else that we're going to talk to Ambassador Haley about is how her work here at the UN impacts the everyday American. Our interview tomorrow is at noon, and I will have live updates here from New York City starting at 4 o'clock on WMBF News. Outside of the UN headquarters, I'm Caitlin Stansel for WMBF News.
Since former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley was sworn in as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and it's been quite the year. WMBF News anchor Caitlin Stansel is in New York City, where she got to see the ambassador represent our nation during the UN Security Council today.
Her position here at the United Nations has truly been a seat on the world stage. And tomorrow, I get to sit down one-on-one with Ambassador Haley to talk about what this journey has been like for her so far. But for that, though, I did get an inside look at the UN headquarters and the Security Council meeting today. And take a look here. Normally, you would see 193 flags plus the UN flag out here, and it's really a spectacular sight. But we were told for today it was just a little too cold to raise them all. Now, something else really special about the UN headquarters, once you go beyond this point, it's considered international territory, even though it's at the center of New York City. It's a very secure process to go inside, very much like airport security, except you don't have to take your shoes off, fortunately. And once you do get inside, they're very strict about what you can and cannot shoot video of or take photos of. We were very fortunate to experience today's Security Council meeting, and it was such a cool moment to see Ambassador Haley in action. She spoke today about conflict in the Middle East.
I have most often taken the position that this monthly session on the Middle East is miscast. As I've pointed out many times, this session spends far too much time on Israel and the Palestinians and far too little time on the terrorist regimes and groups that undermine peace and security in the region. Chief among them, Iran, ISIS, Hezbollah, and Hamas. That remains my view, and I expect that in future months I will continue to focus on those threats from the Middle East that draw too little attention at the UN.
Tomorrow I get to ask Ambassador Haley about everything from conflict in the Middle East to North Korea being included in the Winter Olympic Games. I'll also ask her if there might be a bid for the White House in her future and what she misses most about South Carolina. Catch my live reports starting at 4 o'clock tomorrow on WMBF News. Reporting from the UN headquarters in New York City, Caitlin Stansel for WMBF News.
WMBF News anchor Caitlin Stansel is right now. She's had pretty incredible opportunity to see the ambassador represent our nation during the UN Security Council today, and today she'll have another special day. Caitlin tells us why.
Good morning from New York City. In just a few hours, I'll be sitting down one-on-one with former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley to talk to her about her year as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. It's a role that has put her front and center on the world stage, dealing with volatile situations involving countries like North Korea, Russia, Iran, and Syria. And she's doing it all far from the state that she has called home for most of her life. She now lives just a few blocks from the UN headquarters here behind me in New York City, and I'm sure it's been quite a change of pace and lifestyle moving here to the Big Apple. I'll ask her all about that in our interview today, and I'll share what she has to say live starting at 4 right here on WMBF News. For now, though, reporting in New York City, Caitlin Stansel for WMBF News.
Since former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley was sworn in as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, today our Caitlin Stansel had an exclusive one-on-one with Ambassador Haley, asking what has the past 365 days have been like for her. She joins us now live in New York City tonight. Caitlin.
Hey, Christelle, we are set up here right outside UN headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. You can see the 193 flags representing those countries that are in the United Nations here behind me. And this is where former South Carolina Governor and now U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley calls her workplace, right here in Midtown Manhattan. This is a critical job. It comes with a lot of challenges, but probably the hardest of all for Ambassador Haley, she says, is being so far from the state that she calls home, South Carolina.
I miss the people so much. I miss the grass. I miss the trees. I miss how beautiful it is. I miss football season and being at the games. I miss Heritage Golf Tournament. There's so much that we miss, but we try and get back as often as we can. We're there for spring break, we're there for summer vacation, so every chance we get to kiss the ground in South Carolina, we do.
In the time that I had with Ambassador Haley, I tried to squeeze in as many questions as possible, getting her candid answers about her transition to New York City life, and also asking her what it's like to stand up to countries like North Korea, Syria, and Iran. We'll have more from my interview with Ambassador Haley coming up in today's shows. For now, though, live from New York City, I'm Caitlin Stansel for WMBF News.
Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley just crossed the threshold of her first year with that title.
Yeah, she's gone from dealing with domestic policy to foreign policy and handling issues with countries like North Korea and Iran.
WMBF News anchor Caitlin Stansel sat down with Ambassador Haley one-on-one today to talk to her exclusively about what this past year and what the future may hold for her in her career.
And she joins us now live outside UN headquarters in New York City. Good evening to you, Caitlin.
Good evening, Christelle. Good evening, Michael. Ambassador Haley says it's been quite a learning curve to prepare for this job, and she's still learning every single day. And while it may be a year ago when she didn't expect or even plan to be thrust onto the world stage in this kind of position, talking to her today, she says she takes this job and its responsibilities very seriously. She says she made a point to ask President Donald Trump that this position be a cabinet level position, meaning her involvement in meetings with the president's inner circle. She also says she wanted to make sure that this wouldn't just be a talking head kind of scenario. She says she didn't want to be told what she had to say, but instead use her experience as governor of South Carolina to help lead policy reform, negotiations, and getting people to understand what the UN does exactly. She's very focused on the job and here and now, the present. But we do want to ask her, could there be a White House bid in her future?
I think we're going to go home to South Carolina. I think that, I would have never thought I'd end up here. And I've always felt like I was blessed. Wherever God opens a door, you move through it. But I've never thought about what I want to be 5 and 10 years from now. I just feel like whatever you do, be great at it and make sure people remember you for it. My mom drilled that into me for so long that that's what I focus on, is just doing my job well. And then when it's over, we go home.
She clearly misses the Palmetto State very much. She said that over and over again, that she misses the grass, the trees, the weather in South Carolina. But she has certainly made New York City her temporary home here. We were actually invited to her residence last night, just a few blocks here from UN headquarters, and it was such a memorable experience. A once-in-a-lifetime experience. The view from her home up there, again, just a few blocks here from the UN headquarters, spectacular. You get a great view of Midtown Manhattan, and even outside of one window in her house, you can see the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building right there in that very same view. But her, in her residence, talking to her, she was so charismatic, so genuine. Everything she was saying, you could tell, was coming from the heart. And I think that that's what a lot of people see when they watch her on TV, and she's just like that in person as well. I can't wait to share more of my interview with her coming up at 6 o'clock, so make sure you stay tuned. And at 5:30, I'm going to tell you how I set this whole interview up and kind of what went into this entire process. For now, though, live outside of the UN headquarters, I'm Caitlin Stansel for WMBF News.
Thank you, Ashley. Our former governor, Nikki Haley, took her first step into foreign territory when she signed on to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations just 1 year ago. In an exclusive interview today, our Caitlin Stansel sat down with Ambassador Haley to learn what this journey has been like. But getting this interview was a journey for Caitlin, too. She joins us now live to tell us about her experience at the UN.
Hey, Christelle, you know that saying, the best things come to those who wait? Well, it's never been truer. I've been very persistent with my emails to Ambassador Haley's representatives, and it all started about a year ago. I started reaching out to them, not necessarily getting a lot of replies back, but I think my persistence paid off. Obviously, we're here in New York City now. We got to talk to Ambassador Haley today. And just 2 weeks ago, we got the call that this was going to happen. We are so excited to hear it. They said they only wanted to bring a few media representatives up here to New York City to do this one-on-one interview with Ambassador Haley. And I was the reporter chosen from the Myrtle Beach area, and I'm so excited that I was. This is a once-in-a-lifetime trip, and it's been awesome. Take a look at some of these photos here. Now, not only was this trip the first time that I've ever had to fly before, I've never been on a plane in my life, but last night we were also invited to Ambassador Haley's home to talk with her off the record, and wow, that's the only way I know how to describe it. She was so genuine, so charismatic, And she has to have one of the best views of this city that she now calls home. In one window, you can see the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building. It was spectacular. Today, though, her staff took us on a tour of the UN headquarters, and we got to see the General Assembly area and take photos with her seat in the Security Council chambers. It's really been such a special trip. I can't wait to share more of this with you guys.
Well, I am certainly proud of you, and to see all of your hard work pay off, it's truly amazing to see you. We're very, very proud of you here, and can't wait to hear more about this interview as you have more to tell us. Well, that's a sneak peek, and there's so much more from Caitlin in New York City we'll have coming up for you on WMBF News at 6 and 7, and also at 11.
While the first year as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations was a huge adjustment for former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. She's gone from dealing with state lawmakers to foreign powers, but she hasn't shied away from the volatile situations happening globally.
Yeah, WMBF News anchor Caitlin Stansel talked with Ambassador Haley one-on-one today in an exclusive interview. She joins us now live from outside the UN headquarters in New York City.
Hey, Crystal and Michael, the United Nations is an organization that works to sustain peace and security globally. They work with humanitarian groups and refugees. And the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, our former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, says she does not take this role lightly. When she was asked to take this position by President Donald Trump, she said she wanted to make sure that he was aware of some things, that she wanted to have the power to make real change in this position.
Well, I never would have thought that this would be a role that I would be interested in. I wasn't that sure of what the United Nations did and how I could be effective at it. But I did tell him that it had to be a cabinet position, and he said done. And I said it has to be, I want to be a part of the National Security Council. I need to be in the room when policy is made. And he said, done. And then I said, I'm not going to be a wallflower or a talking head. And he said, that's why I want you to do this.
I think now more than ever, South Carolinians are really paying attention to what happens here at the United Nations. And Ambassador Haley says she wants to make it her goal to let everyday Americans know how her work here impacts them.
South Carolinians want to know that their children are going to be safe. And this is the place where we talk about how to do that and how to get it done. And sometimes that means calling out countries that are supporting terrorism or doing nuclear threats that they're not supposed to be doing. And sometimes that means coming together and finding common ground on how we can better work as a unit. So South Carolinians, my goal is I want them to care about what happens at the UN. And I want them to understand it's not perfect by any means, but I'm going to use every ounce of it to fight for the United States.
Well, fun fact about the United Nations, although it's located here in New York City, it's actually considered international territory. So me and my photographer, we were supposed to have our passports to get our media credentials for this interview, but neither of us had those. So we had to get the U.S. mission to the United Nations to apply on our behalf. Luckily, that worked out. And we got to tour the UN headquarters today. Actually, it was a really awesome experience. And I can't wait for you to hear more of my exclusive interview with Ambassador Haley coming up on WMBF News at 7. For now, live and cold in New York City, Caitlin Stansel, back to you.
All right, Kayla, we appreciate all the sacrifices you're bringing for that great story. Thanks for that hard work tonight. Well, now to the latest on the Amber Alert out of Scotland County. In the last 30 minutes, officials announced they plan. Our former chief executive in South Carolina has picked up her southern roots and settled them into the Big Apple. We're talking about current U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. She's been in this role for a year now, and WMBF News anchor Caitlin Stansel got to talk to her exclusively about what her big move means. She joins us now live from outside the UN headquarters in New York City. Caitlin.
Michael, Ambassador Nikki Haley says she takes this position very seriously. She told me that when she signed on, she told President Donald Trump she wanted this ambassadorship to be a cabinet level position. She wanted to be involved in the inner circle. She wanted to be involved in policy making. And she didn't just want to be a talking head. And I think South Carolinians know at this point that Ambassador Haley is very opinionated. We've seen her as the former governor of South Carolina. And Ambassador Haley tells me President Trump supports her in that. And he chose her for that very reason, that he knew that she would speak up when it was necessary. She took on this position just 1 year ago, So she's still pretty new to this foreign diplomacy. She says she's still learning every day, and that also goes for interacting with representatives from countries like Russia and North Korea. I asked her how she stands her ground against them when controversies come up.
I have such a love for this country, and I have pride in the United States. And so I'm not going to let anyone put down our country. I'm not going to let anyone try and derail or tell lies about it or anything that's going to in any way demean the American public. And so for me, it's a service, but it's something I'm extremely passionate about.
Well, Michael, we of course have seen her as the governor of South Carolina, and she's been in this new position for a year. January 25th, 2017 is when she was officially sworn in. So we are right here at this anniversary mark, and she's really looking forward to year 2 in this position.
Boy, I bet she is. What a neat perspective you had there, Caitlin. Any other big topics that stood out for you in the discussions today?
Yeah, of course, we asked her about some of the threats that she's keeping a really close eye on globally right now. Being in this position here at the United Nations, she's interacting with the world, quite literally. Of course, North Korea on that list, Iran is on that list, and extremist groups like ISIS, Hezbollah, and Hamas. We also asked her about, with the Winter Olympics coming up in North Korea, now included in those games, what her thoughts were on that. And that's some of what you're going to hear on Monday in my full report at 6.
Looking forward to that for sure. Okay, let's get a little personal. You got an invite to Haley's apartment there in New York City. What's it like seeing her outside of the public spotlight there?
Oh man, first of all, that was really unexpected. We got the email yesterday, just a couple of hours before, and I was telling Drew, my photographer, you're never going to believe this. We just got invited to go up to Nikki Haley's home here in New York City. Traditionally, the U.S. ambassador was staying in the Waldorf Astoria, but actually the Chinese bought that building, so they're renting a new building that is just a couple of blocks here from the UN headquarters in New York City. It was so awesome to interact with her in that way, you know, outside of the cameras and the microphones, and she is still just so genuine and heartfelt. And of course, we talked to her a lot about South Carolina and how much she misses it. And something that I noticed is she had a palmetto tree necklace right next to her heart, and she says she wears it every day to remember the Palmetto State. Back to you, Michael.
Boy, such a neat perspective there, Caitlin. Thanks so much for that. I know it's 34 degrees in New York. We'll let you get inside and get warmed up. Thanks so much for that hard work out there, Caitlin. All right, let's bring it back to the beach now with a live look over the chilly Grand Strand. It's still cold here, about 48 degrees.
U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley has traded in the State House for the UN headquarters and famously hot Columbia for bitter cold New York City. Today I sat down with our former governor to talk about what the past year has been like as she has assumed the role of U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. It's a position that has come with accomplishments, but also challenges. And I asked her what her goals are heading into year 2.
Trying to show value in the UN and trying to get the UN to understand they can't take the United States for granted anymore. That's been one part of it, reforming the UN so that they appreciate the value of a dollar and they understand these are taxpayer dollars and we want to see that dealt with, and then getting people to understand what the UN does. Really trying to communicate foreign policy through the United Nations in a way that your average person doesn't have to work hard to understand. That's always been a goal.
I will have much more from my exclusive interview with Ambassador Haley on WMBF News at 6 on Monday. Catch my full report when I'm back in Myrtle Beach. For now, outside of the UN headquarters in New York City, I'm Caitlin Stansel.